I did hear rumors through the parent network that there might be some legislation pending to mandate compassionate access to any drug, regardless of whether it's been used in adults before.
That would be very interesting.
Which, yes, and that was brought about by some things that happened late last year with Genentech and a patient and some.
We've definitely had that issue. I mean, some patients don't qualify for our studies if their LFTs are too high, if they're, and the family would really like to have access to the drug. It's a drug we think may have be able to help that patient, but can you not hear me? And so that's definitely been, an issue. We do hold the INDs for our drugs. We've also had an occasion for where there is a drug. We've done the preclinical work. We're publishing a paper. This is a great drug. We really want to get it into our patients, but the company wants to finish their adult lymphoma safety package first. The adult world is more important. And so we're waiting, and we know that the company does want to work with us at some point to bring this to kids, but it's something that we really love. The trial's ready to go. We'd love to get this drug to our kids, but they need the market approval in adults, and so phase 1. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and it's once the adults generally have a MTD in their phase 1, pediatrics, we start at 75% of the MTD of the adult dose, and we can get the phase 1 going, but we have to have the agreement of the company.
I think for everybody here, there's a couple of realities that we have to face. One just hit home the other day in my own living room. My son was watching the New York Yankees play, and he had heard me talk about this issue before about funding as a teenager. Alex Rodriguez came to bat. My son turned to me and said, "Dad, do you know Alex Rodriguez is making $32 million a year this year?" Then he turned to me and said, "You know what, from what you told me at the dinner table, that organization, i.e. Cure Search, was only getting $25 million. Thus, Alex Rodriguez is making $7 million more this year than the NCI funding for Cure Search." The second comment I wanted to make was actually, Dr. Whiteman, I'll get your thoughts on this. And it's for parents here. How many folks here are parents or have had children that have had neuroblastoma? So there's many of them. How many here have looked at MIBG as a possibility for treatment for their son or daughter? I think the MIBG story points out many of the pitfalls that we all face as researchers here. MIBG first was started as a therapeutic modality in 1987. It's now 23 years later, and no NDA has ever been granted. It met all the requirements that Dr. Whiteman said for getting an NDA. 1, you have to show safety of an agent. 2, you have to show efficacy with good response rates. 3, you have to show durability of response. And then 4, it has to be in a population size, or it has to be validated in a sizable sample population. And it has been MIBG in all 4 of those situations. The problem with MIBG that everybody here faces is that, 1, the FDA is required for an NDA a pivotal phase 3 study. So for patients with refractory disease, we're often faced with neuroblastoma. What is the phase 3 study? Phase 3 studies are typically against the gold standard. Well, what's the gold standard of therapy for refractory neuroblastoma? There is none. In fact, the FDA actually asked us to run MIBG therapy in a phase 3 trial against palliative care. We couldn't do it. That was going to be the pivotal trial. MIBG therapy against basically hospice. And then we had issues with the drug supplier. And from their avenue, it was MIBG therapy is purely targeting a pediatric population with a very limited adult avenue, i.e. a few adults with pheochromocytoma. So why should they put the work for an NDA for an agent that really has just a pediatric role? Dr. Whiteman, you should be commended for getting an agent through based on just a phase 1 and phase 2 studies. You didn't do it with a phase 3 study. It looked like I was watching your slides. The FDA, in the neuroblastoma community, the FDA is holding us to a phase 3 study to get MIBG through. And for every parent who's been out here who's faced with MIBG, You know the difficulties in how is it going to get paid for, how is it going to get covered, will my child get treated? And 23 years later, we're still asking ourselves those same 3 questions.
Yeah, if I can just comment at least on one of your points. And, you know, one thing that I struggled with from the very beginning, because I ran into that where they were asking us to do a randomized study in 3rd relapse ALL or greater. And when we looked at the statistical, first of all, we didn't know what the comparator arm would be. Anyone who treats ALL will know that there's a whole bag of different drugs, but that there's really no standard. And so if you'd open it up to investigator choice or something else, you would get a whole mish of different arms and drugs included in there. But it really was about a 10-year trial to do, and I don't care if you're a company or an institute, 10 years is a long time to be able to commit to one study. The one thing that we really struggled with, though, and I think if we had the FDA here to have a good roundtable, open discussion, is that approval for drugs in pediatrics still follows the Code of Federal Regulations for adult indications. 2 well-controlled, randomized studies, maybe 1 you can get by with. But it almost seems to me we're at the point where we do need to design a regulatory process specific for molecular targeted agents, where there may be much smaller patient numbers with that, as well as for any orphan drug indications such as pediatric tumors. There's got to be a different strategy and process to support that type. Otherwise, you'll run into just exactly what you're saying. And I ran into it multiple times, kept hearing over and over again, we're not treating this drug any differently than we would if it was going for non-small cell lung cancer. You have to follow the same guidelines, have the same proof of concept and stability in the data, and you have to validate everything. You just can't do it in these. And so that, to me, is one of the most biggest disincentives to do those types of studies, because there's just nothing at the end. There's no way you can do something like that. So to me, an open discussion about can we develop a different process for orphan indications like this. Accelerated approval is sort of one of those, but that door now has almost closed. It's becoming much more difficult, as the last ODAC meeting suggested. Now you still need to do a randomized study. You can get accelerated approval, but you need a randomized study. For these indications we're talking about today, it's a big challenge, almost impossible to do.
I think this is, am I done? Look, I think this is an issue also that would merit collaboration between patient advocates like ourselves and researchers, insofar as, we are the ones with the moral authority to say, how can you ask me to put my kid on a control arm? Mm-hmm. And I think if you go to the FDA for an SPA and you make this argument, everything is unemotional and it's in a flat scientific paradigm. But I think if you get a sizable number of parents to say this isn't something really which is in comportment with our family values and our culture, I think then we could move the needle a little bit. I think there's the opportunity.
I wonder if there could be a consortium, a pediatric oncology consortium of advocates that is similar to like the cystic fibrosis spin-off that does drug development. A POC, POCA, actually means small in Spanish, I think, right? And that organization could hold an IND, could go negotiate with the drug company that doesn't want to do anything because there's not enough return on the investment or whatever, and acquire the pieces needed. And that organization negotiate with the FDA, because now you got the patient advocates really in the front line in that conversation. Just an idea. But all I know, you have a lot of different groups, mm-hmm. But you could think of it as even like a company that's selling shares. That's not right. What I mean legally, literally. So, but everyone can have interest and contribute.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Let me just interrupt to say that I think it's a great idea. I think you already have the mechanism in place theoretically with the COG. The problem that exists with the COG and the reason that it's so unwieldy today is that it's not getting funding. You can't even do statistical analysis of trials.
But COG is not a patient organization, a parent organization. It's a medical.
No, it's not. Of course not. It's a research organization.
But the consortium, the POCA could be the master of the cog, which is like the CRO.
Right.
And then you can maybe get the best of both worlds. But they
Right.
have to answer to, ultimate endpoint is getting a drug approved.
Right, I think
Right.
it's a great
Yeah, no,
idea.
the
And
trials need to
that's
be
not to
written
say
as
that
such.
organizations like, this one that brought this together aren't great. It's so creative, there's so many new drugs being brought out here, it's so exciting. So I don't want to say that there's anything negative at all about this, but you do have this thing that already binds all 200 hospitals together.
Yeah, right.
Yep. And all of our institutions are absolutely part of COG, and COG and leading the way in, frontline therapy is absolutely critical. But in terms of being nimble and being able to bring new drugs in to test it, and then which will lead into COG. All of this is a
Exactly.
feeder into COG, kind of smaller groups bringing it together. But I think this has been a really exciting day, and we are significantly past our time, but this last discussion has been really great, and I think it's bringing up a huge issue is, we are not small adults, and the regulatory path for adult oncology doesn't work for pediatric oncology. With one drug being approved in 20 years, it's clear it doesn't work, and I think this is exciting, and Dr. Wyman, your suggestions in terms of, talking with the FDA, looking at the FDA and saying, how can we bring forward another path, a path that will allow drugs to get moved forward in pediatrics and take care of these kids. But I agree, having this led by the pediatric advocates is where I think, as I said, talking with a parent of a child, a parent who's lost a child from cancer, makes everyone kind of look and really want to do the right thing, and what is the right ethical decision for this pathway. And I think this is just a first discussion, and I think that we should definitely continue this further in future meetings and move this forward.
Yeah, no, I just think the symposium's going to be a day and a half next time,
Sure.
at least.
Yeah, we'll just go all night.
Because this is great. I think this could have been easily,
entire
part of a
afternoon.
multi-part, track all on its own, and especially if we get more government, participation in this discussion, it'll really help to speed the partnering along that we all know is necessary to create some new therapies for kids. So,
Yeah. All right.
thank you, panelists.
Yes, and thank everyone for coming here today and coming to the Van Andel Research Institute. We're so happy to have all of you here, everyone that's traveled from out of town, and I know it was a lot of difficulty for a lot of you to get here yesterday, but you all made it, and I'm so happy. Thank you to all our speakers, to all the parent foundations that have supported our work and that are here today and sharing and moving all of this forward. And we will be just meeting out in the hall, and if you want to continue discussions, we can continue out here. Thank you.